Good evening and welcome to the League of Women Voters Forum for the November 4th general election candidates for the 70th and 72nd Wisconsin State Assembly districts and Wood County Sheriff positions. We are pleased to bring you this forum televised and live streamed on River City's Community Access Media. We invite all of our audience to phone in questions to the candidates by using the number on the screen, 423-0441. The questions should be directed to the office and not to a particular candidate. Only questions pertaining to issues, not personalities, will be asked, and questions will be screened and sorted for clarity, directness, and duplication. Our candidates will have 2 minutes for opening and closing statements and a 2-minute response to each question in rotating order. We will begin with the candidates competing for the 70th and 72nd Wisconsin Assembly districts. Nancy Lynn Vandermeer will be facing Amy Sue Vruink for the 70th Assembly position, but Nancy Lynn Vandermeer declined the League's invitation to participate this evening. Scott Krug will be facing Dana Duncan for the 72nd Assembly position, but he also declined, Scott Krug did, the League's invitation to participate this evening. Amy Sue Vruink and Dana Duncan are here to meet the voters and take your questions. On behalf of the League, thank you for your willingness to appear here and also for your willingness to run for public office. It's time to start, and we will begin with opening statements, and Amy Sue Vruink will go first.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody who is here this evening and those who are joining us from the comforts and joys of their own home. I'm Amy Sue Vruink, and I'm running for the 70th Assembly District. I was born right here in Wood County on my family's dairy farm. I'm the youngest of 8 children. I chose to move back home and to raise my 2 children, Kennedy and Jack, with my husband Matthew in a rural Wood County setting where I'm really literally not too far from home. Hop, skip, and a jump across the creek through the woods is where we make our home in Sherry. I'm running because I believe in the people of central and western Wisconsin. During redistricting, I was redistricted out of a part of my old district into a new district all the way down to La Crosse County borderline. And so I'm running because I believe that people in Wisconsin deserve somebody who's going to stand up and fight for their best interests, not for their own best interests, and not for special interests, and not for the party bosses. Somebody who will be an independent voice. I have a proven bipartisan record. I have a 70% voting record in the state assembly, voting with Republicans, and I believe that my voice and my leadership can only be positive and be helpful to the people of the 70th Assembly District. And we need jobs, we need good infrastructure, whether that's roads or broadband, and we also need to protect our public schools so all of our children have a bright future. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Amy Sue Vruink running for the 70th Assembly position, and now we have Dana Duncan running for the 72nd Assembly position.
Thank you, and good evening. Good evening to everyone in the audience, and good evening to those at home. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event. It's important for candidates to meet with the public and to express interest in the various issues and the questions they have, and to make yourself available to people and to address the concerns and things that they have going on in their lives. Unfortunately, my opponent chose to not be here tonight, and so you're going to be denied an opportunity to hear him. But I'm going to go on and present my opinions on things, and hopefully you will appreciate where I'm coming from. As I said, I'm Dana Duncan. I am president of the Port Edwards Board of Education, have been for 6 of the 8 years I've been on the board. During that time I've been on the board, the mill rate, the amount of money that we bill the taxpayers, is actually lower now than it was when I started. I'm also an attorney. I do Social Security, disability, and workers' comp, veterans benefits law, and I have for the last 6 years exclusively. I do that, and I want to share the story of why I do that. When I was 15 years old, I sat in my dining room and I watched a woman cry because she had spent 18 years of her life working at a television factory as an inspector. And that woman went blind from diabetic retinopathy, and she was denied Social Security disability benefits. She didn't know how she was going to pay the mortgage, and she just sobbed. That was my mother, and I swore at that point that I would spend my life making sure that people who deserve benefits, people that the government turns their back on, that society does, they would be benefited, or they would have my leadership and my energy. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you. Dana Duncan, candidate for the 72nd District of the Wisconsin State Assembly. Our first question will go to Amy Sue Ruink first. No, I'm sorry, Dana Duncan first. There has been a grassroots effort to increase the minimum wage from $7.25 to $10.10 an hour. Do you favor this adjustment or any adjustment to the minimum wage?
Yes. Pure and simple. The states that have adopted an increase in the minimum wage to $10.10 have seen a 23% increase in the overall economic growth in that state. I do think that we should look at a two-tier system. This is something that's been incorporated through Culver's, and Craig Culver had this idea where children under the age of 18 would have a lesser wage, so that allows them to come into the workforce and to learn how to do the job. But $10.10 is a living wage. It needs to be at least that. Individuals should not, in our society today, have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet. There should be a minimum amount that you can have in order to pay for the food, the housing, and such. As we continue to say parents need to be more and more responsible for their children and to do all these things and to be involved in their schooling, and it makes it really difficult for families to do this when they have to put so much time and effort into work just to make a living. So, thank you.
Thank you. Amy Sue Verwink.
First of all, I'd just like to point out that Dana and I are not running against each other for the 72nd to the 70th district. But I would like to, I did support. In the legislature, we had a proposal up, and I said, you know something, maybe that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would not support 10.10, but maybe they would support a 35-cent raise. I mean, we're compromising. I can understand when I talk to small businesses around my district, the people are really concerned about how they would make that jump. And when I talked to people, they said, you know, Amy Sue, if this was the case, then, you know, could we have some time to build it into our prices, to build it into our products? And I said, absolutely, that makes sense. So on the assembly floor, I thought maybe my colleagues across the aisle would be willing to compromise and come together and actually start the discussion and start having an increase in the minimum wage. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And the more and more I talk to people out in the rural 70th Assembly District, that I'm meeting families that work 3-4 jobs and that are worried and concerned about their children at night when they're leaving them at home alone because they have to go to work. And they're like two ships passing in the night. And this is something that's concerning. That is true that families are having a harder time struggling today and talking about the cost of insurance, the cost of food is going up, the gasoline prices, everything continues to go on the rise. However, wages don't. And if we want to make sure that people get off government programs, we need to start by making sure that they have a living wage and a family supporting wage. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will go to Amy Sue Verwink first. What will you do specifically to increase bipartisanship in Madison?
That's a good question. As I had said in my intro, that I have a 79% voting record with the Speaker of the State Assembly. And I have shown through our committee work that we can work together. I actually had an amendment on the Assembly floor, which never happens anymore, but I had an amendment, and I had worked with the author, Al Ott, and I said, Al, I'm like, this is a concern. We have problems with the railroad in our district, and a lot of people where I represent live on dead-end roads, and they cannot get through. And I had one gentleman out in Junction City that they had a family emergency, medical emergency, and they couldn't get through, so they crawled through the train, which is even more dangerous. And so I asked Al, I said, you know, something would be very helpful if I could require that the railroads would actually put a phone number to contact if they've been sitting there for hours and hours on end, is what we have seen in the village of Rudolph, in the town of Carson. And he said, sure. And so right when the vote came, they stopped proceedings and they came over to Al, and Al said, no, I discussed this with Amy Sue, and she did her homework. She checked everything she needed to check, and I'm accepting her amendment on the floor, which was wonderful because this is really about our people of our district, and we're supposed to be making sure that they're safe and that they have a voice in their government. And working across lines was the first step, but I think redistricting, nonpartisan redistricting, and giving this to a board that is not made up of politicians, because we should not be selecting our constituents. The people should be selecting us. And I think that would help to make also more competitive seats, that people have to work together, that they have to come across the party lines and actually get their work done. So I think that's something that's also very important in making sure that we increase bipartisanship.
Thank you. Our question is, what will you do specifically to increase bipartisanship in Madison? Dana Duncan.
It's kind of a sad state of affairs that we have to ask this question of candidates running for public office. I've worked with Republicans my whole life because they're my family. They're my closest friends. I have more friends that are Republicans than are Democrats. We argue about politics, but we still spend time together and enjoy each other's company. I think part of this is going to be that we have to start looking for things that we can do to rebuild trust. Now, I've got a couple of different things. Last year, the Assembly had a bill to promote a craft beer tourism board that would allow marketing of craft beer from Wisconsin. It was proposed by 2 members of the Republican caucus. I would love to be a part of that and be a co-sponsor next year, and I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's great. That's the kind of thing you need to do. I go down on my way to work in Wisconsin Rapids down 8th Street every morning, and every morning I watch cars blow through the crosswalks where the school kids cross to go to Grove School. I think that we could get together and have bipartisan support to really modify and make the penalties for exceeding speed limits through those crosswalks much more severe than they are. I think we also need to look, apparently according to Good Morning America, there are approximately 13 million times people violate the red lights on school buses. We could get together and do that bipartisanly to protect children. That is what makes sense, and I hope that's what I can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Dana Duncan. Would you support a bill that would allow any law-abiding citizen to carry a firearm concealed without a permit?
We have permits. We have allowed this to go forward. I think that there's nothing wrong with the permit. I'm a gun owner, and I have no problem with the current law as it's written. I don't believe that we need to take away the permit requirement. It's a very minimal amount. I mean, when you look at the regulations and rules in place for what it takes to get a permit, it's not that difficult to get. I think it does provide a little protection for the general public, but it also is not really a significant detriment to those who want to possess and carry a firearm. I think that would be the most logical thing, and I would support continuing the law as it's currently written and would not change anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Sue Verwink.
As a fellow gun owner and hunter, and we actually got to shoot trap the other day, that right now our current laws have been updated, and that we have worked on them with concealed carry permits, the Castle Doctrine, and I've been in support of that piece of legislation. And I don't know what angle that this is going at to allow law-abiding citizens to carry without a permit. It also gives protections for law-abiding gun owners, that that you are law-abiding, that you do respect your right to carry, and that that I think it works both ways, instead of just saying, well, we should just everybody carry without a permit. And I think that these are set up with consideration of things that have happened across our country, and that we need to be mindful and respectful of Second Amendment and gun owners and the general public.
Thank you. Our fourth question this evening will be posed to Amy Sue Verwink first. Should the current school voucher program be enlarged or changed or eliminated? And do you see the benefits of this program?
Currently, the voucher program has been expanded, and what happened is that our last biennium that we changed the requirements. Now we're opening it up to 1,000 students across the state in the next biennium, and then now the talk is that Speaker Voss would like to rip the limits off totally, so there'd be no caps on voucher schools in the state of Wisconsin. Their voucher schools are not accountable in the ways that they don't have to take special needs students, they don't have to do the background checks, that there is an added cost to having this. We had a voucher school in the Milwaukee area that had 60 students enrolled, and the 60 students went to school one day, they went home, the next day they came back, and the school was gone. They picked up and they left with taxpayer dollars and went to Milwaukee, or went to Florida and bought as far as I heard was, they bought a place on the beach. But they took our money and they took it away from our school children. And right now our schools need those resources. And now we're going to be funding two parallel systems, but one that's unaccountable and the other one that is, right, where public schools are great, but the more money we take from them, the more harm we are doing to them. So investing in public education means an investment in our future, means an investment in our children, and I don't believe in the voucher system. I think that there is a lot of problems with the voucher system, and I think it's the wrong direction in order to rip off the caps and let everybody enroll in those. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Duncan.
Thank you. Well, as a public school board president, let me say this, that I am against an expansion of the voucher program. Once you get outside of Milwaukee and Racine, where there's very specific requirements and needs, I don't believe the vouchers have any place in Wisconsin. They skim the money right off the top. So when the money goes in for the equalization, that money immediately is taken off to go into the vouchers. Then the public schools get to divvy up what's left under the voucher system. When you consider that $139 million was lost to voucher schools that stopped teaching our children over the last 10 years, we see that there's a big problem with these schools. Now, my opponent and I got into a heated debate during a consortium of the public schools where I pointed out that there was absolutely no oversight at all for these voucher schools. And he argued with me up and down that I was wrong. Well, I've been proven right. And I wish he were here tonight to answer why he didn't believe they were. But again, he's more interested in politics than answering to his constituents. So this is a situation where voucher schools are already dealing with kids that 75% of which were already enrolled in parochial schools. They don't need it. I paid for my kids to go to a parochial school out of my own pocket when they were in grade school. They then went on and graduated from John Edwards High School, all three of them, and did very well for themselves in public schools as well. But that was a choice I made, and I didn't ask for a handout from the government to do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question to Dana Duncan. Do you support Governor Walker's call to repeal the Common Core educational standards?
No. This is a red herring. This is designed by the governor solely to placate a certain element of the population that he hopes will come out en masse to vote for him on November 4th. The Common Core is nothing more than a yardstick. It tells you what the requirements are that you need and tries to set it up in a way that allows you to measure state to state what is involved, what the scores are. I have looked at it. I have been involved in the implication in Port Edwards. There is nothing to this that requires anything other than what's already been adopted. I keep hearing all this other stuff that supposedly Common Core does. Common Core is an educational tool. It is not a Rorschach test that anybody can read whatever they feel like reading into it. So, no, I do not support Governor Walker's efforts, and Common Core should stay. Let the educational professionals run it, not the legislature, and not an individual who never graduated college.
Thank you. Amy Sue Verwink.
I think the Common Core, as it is, has been developed by educational professionals. It's had a ton of input, and right now it's at the local level, and that's where it should stay, and that's where school districts can opt in or they can opt out. It's more rigorous, and we've had input from that it's more rigorous, that it's been developed by these educators and outside groups. I can't remember how many superintendents came down to the Capitol and said, let us do our jobs. Let us educate our children. And I couldn't agree more that this repeal of trying to get people out to say this is a government takeover and so on and so forth. I can give you a couple real world examples. One is I actually represent Fort McCoy down in Monroe County. And part of that is that they go to the Toma School District and the Sparta School District. So they have students coming from all over the United States coming to go to school in the public schools there. And it really allows teachers the tool to be able to look at these children's strengths and their weaknesses, and to be able to help them improve on their strengths and also bring up their weaknesses so that they can be able to have lifelong learning. My daughter is in first grade. She came home the other day, and this is really, I was looking at them like, this is not the math that I remember. Just know your multiplication tables and be able to memorize it. This actually encourages lifelong learning and practicality. So this is something that students can learn from little on and take that with them for the rest of their lives. But also, I have a middle school teacher in the Toma School Middle School, and he actually does presidential simulations. And so they don't run on parties like we do, but they run on their own parties like the Pink Panthers, and they have all different fun names. But it's actually a simulation that allows them to actually get up and debate the issues, talk about issues like school lunches, recess, sports, and things like that that are important to them. And so that gives them a real life, real world experience. And these are some of the things that they've incorporated that's going to help these students with lifelong learning. And that's what we want our students to do. We just don't want them to memorize. We want them actually to have the tools to have lifelong learning and practicality in the workplace.
Thank you. I'll take a little brief moment here just to have our candidates catch their breaths and remind our viewers at home, whether you are watching this forum televised or live streamed on River City's Community Access Media, that we are inviting you to phone in questions, and that number is 423-0441. Our candidates here are Amy Sue Vruwink. She will be facing Nancy Lynn Vandermeer for the 70th District in the Wisconsin State Assembly. And Dana Duncan, he will be facing Scott Krug in the November 4th election for the 72nd District. And both of these candidates have accepted our invitation to appear here. Thank you. Our next question will start with Amy Sue Vruwink. What is your opinion about the increasing amount of out-of-state money going to Wisconsin politicians? Would you accept, or have you accepted, or what are the reasons for accepting money from an out-of-state contributor?
An out-of-state contributor, let's see. I've got two sisters in the state of Texas, so those are my sisters, so I would take their money. An aunt and uncle out in Oregon, I'd take their money. A cousin out in California, an aunt out there, I'd take their money. Those are things that they are giving because they want to, because they believe in me and they believe in the government and process that comes with it. But when we have out-of-state contributors that are giving multi-million dollars and can hide under third-party guises that can control our government and control our legislature, and what the outcomes of it, it's a detriment to our entire democracy and to our society. I don't like this outside money coming in. I like to accept money from my family that live out of state. However, that when this out-of-state money comes in, you are going to be beholden to those people out of state. And I don't understand why people run for public office when they're going to be beholden to people who don't even live in our state, don't pay taxes in our state, don't contribute to our state, but yet they're going to be beholden to those out-of-state these private interests that are hiding as third-party shadow groups. And you can hear them on the radio. And you can be asking yourself, what is it? The people that are playing in both of our races is really Scott Jensen, and it's being funded by the out-of-state school vouchers, because we are standing up for our public schools. We believe in our public schools. So these third party have come together, out-of-state voucher schools, and are funding the races against us, and running negative campaigns and attack ads to mislead voters, because they want to control the process and they want to control the outcome. And so I think it's good that we stand up against these. I think they should be identified. They should tell who they are and where they're coming from and what their purpose is, so they can be upfront and we can have transparency in our campaigns and elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Duncan.
Thank you. Very good question. I've accepted some money from out of state, from companies that do business in Wisconsin. I've accepted it from some attorneys that I know who do the same type of work I do, but they have clients who appear in Wisconsin and live in Wisconsin. So I at least have my contributions tied to actual things that go on in Wisconsin. The problem I'm seeing more and more is that we keep spending more and more and more money. And it dawned on me that the slogan that we keep hearing is that Wisconsin's open for business. Unfortunately, I think Wisconsin's up for sale to the highest contributor. And unfortunately, it's affecting our ability to make decisions on our environment It's affecting our ability to make decisions on our elections. It's affecting our ability to make decisions on policy, on taxation, on schools. I think it should be eliminated. I would like to see it eliminated. I'm not going to touch on the third-party expenditures because I think the voters are smarter than they are and can see through that somebody who's willing to stand in front of a camera and face the public and answer questions, as I will on Saturday morning at From the Ground Up. So if anybody has any questions about any of these ads, I'll be glad to sit there at 9 o'clock and answer them. So, and that shows that I have nothing to hide. I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question to Dana Duncan. The current voter ID law has been put on hold. As a member of the Assembly, would you support any changes to this law or continuing the law as written, and reasons why?
I don't believe that the voter ID law as written should stand. As part of my practice of law, I do a lot of federal work, so I know most of the federal judges. And the dissenting opinion in the voter ID law in the Seventh Circuit was written by Judge Posner. And if anybody read Judge Posner's dissent and realized some of the eloquent things he said about it, he pointed out some things that the right to vote is the most fundamental thing that a citizen has. And anything that detracts from that right causes harm to the greater democracy. You have to establish your identity when you register. The voter ID is just in place to make it more difficult for certain elements. When you're trying to see that the ballots get sent to places like the nursing homes in town, individuals who haven't had driver's licenses for years, are you telling them that they're no longer able or willing or capable of voting because they don't have the proper identification when they've voted probably longer than most of us have been alive? I don't think so, and I don't think this is appropriate, and I would not like to see it passed or continue in the present form. Thanks.
Thank you. Our question is, the current voter ID law has been put on hold. As a member of the Assembly, would you support any changes to the law or maintaining the law? Your reasons why?
I didn't support the voter ID law when we first voted on it. The cost was around $1 million that we're providing IDs for people now, and that there's a cost to that because if we would charge a fee, it would be a poll tax, and that is illegal. So this whole time, this whole legislative session has been about making it harder for people to vote. We've changed so many election laws. That's the one thing my clerk said to me, said, please stop playing with the election laws. It's making it difficult for people, it's confusing to people, it's hard to recruit people to work at the polls because they're confused and it keeps changing. I mean, the whole voter ID, we were ready to roll. It's like, okay, we have to have our ID, but then, oh, nope, we're not, and then we do. And it's something to muddy the waters, to confuse voters, that so they can stay at home, so they don't want to vote. I mean, this is was a total voter suppression tactic again. And we should be encouraging people to get out to vote, to exercise their constitutional right, to get out there and to vote and to make sure their voices are heard. And we do that through our votes. And that's one way that we can continue, is to make sure people's voices are being heard, and that the issues and opinions of our constituents have the right to be heard and to be upheld. This voter ID is just something that I think we're going to see continue because it's a shiny object for the legislature to say, look at over here while we do more damage in other places. And we have seen continuously the voter suppression, intimidation, reducing the amount of feet before somebody who is observing can look over your shoulder to take a look to see who you're voting for, especially in urban areas. But in my rural areas, people are offended that we have to be asking somebody who has known people for generations of their family now are saying, you don't trust me? And it is, people have told me that they're very offended by it.
Thank you. Our next question to Amy Sue Vruwink. What do you see as the biggest challenge for your assembly district, and how will you address it?
The biggest challenge was redistricting. That was the number one. Until I said, well, we're all Wisconsinites, we all care about our state, and we all have to work together in order to move us forward. But the real obstacle has been jobs and job creations in the rural areas. We look at our infrastructure of not only our roads and the lack of maintenance because of the lack of funds that the state has provided, our counties, our towns, our cities, that our roads are in repair, that the cost is continuously going up. And all they can do is make Band-Aid patches to patch it up. Also, the infrastructure for broadband. A lot of our schools, a lot of our small businesses still lack the opportunity to have broadband access, that technology that is supposed to be there to help them to grow our rural economies. And people, investments. We have seen some of the largest cuts to education, technical colleges. I mean, if we're talking about a skills gap, we shouldn't be cutting $70 million from our technical colleges, where our small businesses can work with our technical colleges, listen to the concerns that they have, and help train and retrain our workers to make sure that they can have a wonderful job, they can have a living wage. But it's about investing not only in our roads, our technology, our people, our students, but also investing in our communities. In this election, I was called a big spender because I did not repeal automatic indexing for the transportation fund back in 2005. And now our transportation fund is looking at a $680 million deficit. With the repeal of the automatic indexing since 2005, we would have had over $500 million in the transportation fund. Now that's a big jump in closing the gap of making sure that we can maintain the infrastructure, especially in rural economies. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Duncan, what do you see as the biggest challenge for your assembly district, and how will you address it?
Thank you. I would concur with Amy Sue on the jobs and infrastructure issues, but I would add to that one of the things that I think is at the heart of this assembly district right now, and that's quantity and quality of water. We have a big problem with high capacity wells in the 72nd Assembly District, whether it be in Wood County, whether it be in northern Adams, whether it be in western Waushara, or the southern portion of Portage County. Water is to the 21st century what oil was to the 20th. It's going to determine our economic growth. It's going to determine how well we do in quality of life. If you do not do the things necessary to protect that water, you will not see the tourism industry grow, which I think is primed to be a major player in central Wisconsin. You will not see the movement of, or the migration back to Wisconsin that's starting to take place from places such as California and Arizona because of the lack of water. Even places in the Sun Belt, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, are having problems with water due to droughts and such. So the growth rate, according to the Federal Reserve, is going to be around the Great Lakes because of the availability of that fresh water. We as Wisconsinites need to protect that groundwater. We need to make sure that we have it for ourselves and for our future generations, and that we do not ruin this great resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, back to Dana Duncan. If elected or re-elected, would you continue to accept per diem payments?
Careful, Dana.
Yes. Per diem is given to members of the legislature for the opportunity or to help defray the cost of traveling and living in Madison. It's been established, it's there, it's supposed to be there. I am not going to make some foolhardy position that I'm going to never take per diem ever, because, and then so I can go back on it in a year. No, I'm not going to do that. So yes, I will take per diem. Now, by the same token, I have a profession and a business, and I'm in Madison. If I'm going to Madison on business, and I'm going to be going down there on that day, and I have to stop at my legislative office, I'm not going to take per diem on that day because I'm there on other reasons. And my hope is that by having a dual purpose, I'll save the taxpayers money. I don't think you're going to see me in the top third of the legislature in per diem allotment. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. Amy Sovruink.
The per diem is there to offset your cost. As a legislator who stays down there instead of driving back and forth, that helps offset some of the cost of having a hotel room and buying your meals. When you live 2 hours away from the Capitol and you have your colleagues who are saying, wow, that'd be nice to have, an $88 is what we receive per day. I say, well, that's great, because I said, you get to go home at night, you get to sit down at your own kitchen table, you get to sleep in your own bed. And I said, and I'm paying for a bed to stay in a hotel room, I'm paying for my food, and I don't have that. So it does help offset the cost of being in a city, in the Capitol. And so I've taken it, and I'm respectful of it, that it's there to help legislators offset it, especially when you're so far from home, that it really helps defray your costs. I'm glad you're not making a commitment like that.
Thank you. The next question to Amy Suverwink. Do you believe that Act 10 legislation should be extended to police and firefighters to save money for counties and municipalities?
Act 10 was the most divisive piece of legislation that ever came through the state capitol. What people forget, it wasn't only taking away people's right to organize and collectively bargain for workplace safety, for wages. It also sold off our state's assets with a no bid process. Now, you and I know that if we're going to sell something, that we want to make sure we get the most for what we're selling. Unfortunately, Governor Walker decided that wasn't the case, that we can sell them off to the highest bidder, the person who he maybe gave him the most campaign donations. But the problem with that is that with Act 10, it created divisiveness in the public sector, and that was what it was created to do. It was when he decided to drop the bomb and take away collective bargaining rights, it created so much tension, not only in Wisconsin's families, but those who are working for the public sector. So the fire and police, and you have folks that are working for counties and road and our nursing homes, that it really took away their ability to stand up and say, you know something, I might not have a good wage, but I can collectively bargain my benefits. The unions were willing to give up. That's the other part that people don't want to talk about, that you don't hear about in the news, is that union officials and employees were willing to give up. However, the governor refused to sit down and to talk to them and to take them seriously. And when we talk about bringing people together and actually sitting down and talking with one another, I mean, that's a great place to start, is Act 10, is that we have seen the divisiveness continue and spill over in our families, in our communities, our schools. Public workers are now somewhat feeling threatened that they can't voice their opinion or stand up or be proud of their professions anymore because of the wrath that we have created at the legislative level to do this to our communities, and this is the wrong direction to be going. And we have seen this time and time again now, and we've heard from so many people that after Act 10 that there has been a lot of problems, and we want to make sure that we are working to bring people together and not continuing to divide and conquer people. Sorry.
Thank you. Dana Duncan, do you believe that Act 10 legislation should be extended to police and firefighters to save money for our counties and municipalities?
No. In fact, I'll say it again, no. At some point in time, we as a state, we as a society have to make a decision. Are we going to continue to give tax breaks to the very wealthy in our society and cut costs at the expense or on the backs of our employees who are trying to earn a living? Police and fire officers who put their lives on line every day. The problem is not the union and the wages these people are making. It's the fact that the governor and the state or current party in power continue to cut funding for local governments. Instead of putting money into them through revenue sharing like they should be, they put a cap on their revenue, making it almost impossible for a county government, a municipality, a village to actually pay their bills. You need to remove that. You need to let them make their own decisions. We need to trust these people. I go I've been there 6 times this year to the Wood County Towns Association. And I look around that group and I see hundreds of years of experience in municipal government or in town government. They are the people that should be able to make a decision on what's appropriate for their constituents. They're in the trenches. They know what the taxes should be. They know how to spend their money. It shouldn't be a bunch of politicians in Madison saying, well, we're going to tell you exactly how much you can or can't spend and how much you can or can't raise. So that's the most appropriate way. We need to do property tax reform to resolve it, not take away more wages and benefits for those in our society that risk their lives every day to protect us.
Thank you. Our next question to Dana Duncan. What is your position on Medicaid expansion?
Oh, if I had to pick one thing that is what motivated me to run, it's the lack of thoughtfulness on the part of the governor and the individuals in the legislature on Medicaid expansion. This is our money that we turned down. It was money that could have benefited thousands and thousands of people. It could have created 10,500 additional high-paying medical field jobs in Wisconsin. And yet we just turn it down because of political reasons. All right, at some point in time, politics needs to step aside and you need to start talking as pragmatic leaders. And so yes, I would accept it because I see the effects in my office every day. I've had clients who don't get covered by Badger Care unless they have children. So they only can get medical care when their kids are staying with them for the summer. So they have 3 months to get everything in and then lose their medical care. I had a client who, because of the changes in Badger Care, lost his Badger Care, and as a result could not pay the $800 a month for his health insurance. Or the $800 a month for his medication, for his heart medication. The answer he was given was, because he owned his house, he didn't qualify. If he gives up his house, well, then he qualifies and he can get his heart medication. I don't want to live in a state where people have the choice between being homeless or dying. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Sue Verwink, what is your position on the Medicaid expansion?
Well, I think any leader who has a moral obligation to their constituents and their people would take the money. We've seen Republican governors across the country. We've seen Janet Brewer from Arizona. We saw Chris Christie from New Jersey all take the money. And this is money, this is our taxpayer dollars. This is our money. We want to bring that back. We have a moral obligation to take care of those. We've seen so many people kicked off of Badger Care. This would have been a savings over 3 years, over $500 million for taxpayers. It was a savings if we would have taken this money. We would have covered more people. However, now we're covering less and we're paying more. I've talked to people who are just above the poverty, 100% poverty line, that they can't afford the exchanges, so they're going without any kind of health care. And this is a moral obligation. We need to make sure that people have access to health care. If we want to make sure that we can save money, we want to make sure that we can prevent chronic illnesses, we should be able to treat them now instead of having people use the emergency room for their medical care. And that's the most expensive kind of medical care that is available, is when you go to the emergency room. And so the governor was running for president. He cared more about holding the banner up and running for national politics than he cared about his own people in his own state. We still can, we have the ability to take the Medicaid money, and we should be taking it.
Thank you. The next question to Amy Sue Verwink. Would you favor term limits for members of the Assembly?
This is always a popular question. And I think that is because that people think, well, it's always good to have somebody in short time and get them out. The truth of the matter is when you're elected and you're a freshman legislator, you finally get your feet under there, you're figuring out what you got to do and who you got to work with, you're figuring out your committees, and all of a sudden you got to start fundraising, you got to start campaigning because you're in a campaign cycle again. And you're like, wow, we just got here, we just got the budget passed, this is relief, but now you're campaigning again. I always tell people, every 2 years, I have the option to be hired or fired by the people of my district. People can go to the ballot box, and if I didn't do my job, they can fire me. If I did my job, they can rehire me. And I think that term limits is just a way not to have the continuity that we need in state government, especially because it's wonderful when you have legislators there that you can go to and you can work with them and they're mentors for you. And you can ask them questions and ask how to get things done, that there's kind of this mentoring going on. And I think it's valuable because when you cut out the experience that people have, that's really hurting democracy, it's hurting the way that our legislative process can flow. So I think that term limits is a way to cut out that experience and opportunities there. So every 2 years, we do have term limits, I feel. Every 2 years, you can either rehire or you can fire your legislator. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Duncan, would you favor term limits for members of the Assembly?
No, I don't favor them, and I won't make any commitment that I'll only serve 2 terms like my opponent did. Hopefully the voters will have a say in that and hold him to his promise. As long as you're doing your job and you're connecting with your constituents, and that means that you're meeting with them, you're out talking to them, you're doing all the things that are necessary. Having these opportunities to discuss issues, not hiding, not trying to just say you're in Madison and are out of touch, maybe actually responding to an email once in a while when somebody sends it to your office. Those are the things that voters really find necessary and really helpful, and as long as you're doing those things, you should be able to keep your job. If you're not getting those types of things done, then you should probably be replaced, and I have lots of faith in the voters to do the right thing and to be wise and prudent in how they go about it. Thanks.
Thank you. And one of our last questions here to Dana Duncan. What legislation would you propose that strengthens the 1848 public trust doctrine to give all citizens equal access to clean water?
There have been so many attempts to cut into the power of the DNR through the legislature over the last 4 years that those are the things that need to be resolved. The public trust doctrine, the duty and responsibility to enforce has been given to the DNR. And there was a bill that was proposed last session, Senate Bill 302, which would have limited the ability of the DNR to take into account cumulative impact. So they would take a look at all the wells in an area and determine whether it was too much. All right? Now, my opponent keeps taking credit for killing a Senate bill as a member of the Assembly. I'm not quite sure how that works, since the bill never got out of the state Senate because it didn't have enough votes. But I guess sometimes you'll take credit for almost anything if it helps you. So I think that's the biggest thing right there, is to stop any kind of further enforcement. Eventually, I think the DNR should be a separate entity, much like DPI. The 2 biggest things in Wisconsin right now should be education and our natural resources, and they should be controlled by nonpartisan individuals with experience and knowledge of the agencies separate from partisan politics. At the very least, we need to go back to allowing the DNR head to be appointed by a bipartisan or nonpartisan committee instead of having it a puppet of whichever person is in the governor's mansion.
Thank you. Amy Sue Vruink.
I think that water is one of our essential resources that we have in this state. When I chaired the Agricultural Committee back a few years ago, that we actually had capitalists come in and they said, well, they came in from Boston. I'm like, what are you doing in Wisconsin? And they said, well, you have abundance of all your natural resources here. You have clean, fresh water, which is really a premium. And they said, we talked to people out in California, New Mexico, Arizona, that are looking to coming for Wisconsin. I'm like, well, that sounds good for jobs, but what does that mean for our resources? And I think that the bottom line is that we need common sense regulation that benefits the people and the industries that rely on them, because then we can all have a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you. This is our last question this evening, and I want to thank both of our audiences at home and here in the studio for your questions. And we will start with Amy Sue Vruink. What ideas do you have for Wisconsin to maintain highway construction and general road maintenance, given the large shortfall in this budget area?
That's a good question. Since I'm a member of the Transportation Committee, I like to make sure that we continuously talk about how we're going to fund it. On this November ballot, we'll be talking about having a segregated fund, which is an opportunity to make sure that we protect the fund, which is wonderful when you just talk about it in theory. But the problem with that is that we have not discussed how we're going to create revenue to put in that fund. As I said earlier, we're at a shortfall about $680 million for the Transportation Fund, that we need to be considering alternatives. There was a task force that looked at miles traveled, that you would be taxed on those, maybe upping the registration, maybe make Minnesota the make, the model, the year of the car, then you would pay a higher registration the newer your car is. Also that they're looking at different opportunities to generate revenue. And I think that if people put all their eggs in one basket and say, well, we're just going to pick on people who live out in the country or maybe over-the-road truck drivers and say, we're just going to get you and miles traveled. I don't think that's an answer. I don't think that is a solution. But I think that legislators have to get real and talk about the infrastructure problem that we have and the funding, lack of funding that we have in our state. And that we need to come together and have a frank discussion and not a political gotcha. You know, if you vote for this, I'm going to accuse you of being a tax spender, as we're seeing now on the radio that they're accusing me of. When I took that vote, Highway 10 was coming through my district. I had to take a serious look at it and not to play politics and look at the public policy for years down the road. Not just the next campaign, but years down the road. And too many times, too many legislators in Madison make decisions based on their next campaign. They don't look at the long-term health, the long-term infrastructure of Wisconsin. And this is one of the things that outside money has been influencing quite heavily. But this is something that we need to come together and actually have a serious discussion. I think that we have to look at different options that have been recommended, that we're going to have public input, and that they have done a good job, but I think we can do even a better job of getting people from around the state, because we are having a serious problem with the transportation fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Duncan, what ideas do you have for Wisconsin to maintain highway construction and general road maintenance given the large shortfall in this budget area?
Well, it's going to take political courage. It's going to take people working together. It's going to take bipartisan support. Let me assure you, and I'll say this right up front, I'm a businessman at heart. I own my own business. I created 11 jobs in the last 3 years in that business. So I know what it takes in order to balance a budget. I know what it takes to be very prudent with the taxpayers' money. And I'm going to make sure that what we do in the area of transportation is going to get the best benefit overall for the general public in the future. Good economic development. We need to look at indexing and return to indexing. We need to look at all the different options. We have 49 other states who have looked at similar circumstances and have had great ideas that we can look at of implementation. But I think the most important thing is to remember that whatever the choice is, you're really looking to make the decision based upon what is going to be a strong policy statement, something that's going to really be for long-term economic development and not just some knee-jerk reaction. But we can fix this, but it's going to take that type of bipartisanship, and I'm willing to work hard to do that.
Thank you. Time for closing statements, and we'll move to Dana Duncan first.
Thank you. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. I would also like to thank those of you at home for watching this, and for those here in the audience. This election is about the future of Wisconsin. Now, for the last 4 years, you've been represented by an individual who is not here tonight. That individual has promised never to take per diem, and then he took it. He didn't tell you he was going to take it, he just took it. He said he was going to limit himself to 2 terms. Now he's running for his 3rd. He says that he's going to create a bipartisan water committee that's going to help solve the problems in central Wisconsin, and then they stopped meeting months and months ago. He says that he's going to do something, work out a compromise on the issue of CAFO in central, or in the town of Saratoga, then comes out against it. But the reasoning was basically bogus as to why. He flip-flops. He flip-flops on almost everything. He doesn't show up for his own meetings. He makes his announcement and then doesn't show up in August for the groundwater summit without any explanation. He has been invited to places such as the town or the village of Port Edwards, where I live, every month pretty much for 4 years, and he's yet to attend one of their meetings. I guess the voters have to decide. Do you want an individual who follows the partisan lead 99% of the time as my opponent has, and voted with them every lockstep, who doesn't seem to have any independent decision making unless it's for his own political expedience? Or do you want someone who has 25 years plus of experience dealing with the issues that common people have and face every day? Someone who's been willing to stand up and fight against government and moneyed interests. I thank you. I ask for your vote on November 4th. God bless Wisconsin, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dana Duncan, candidate for the 72nd Assembly District of Wisconsin. He will be facing Scott Krug on the November 4th general election ballot. Our next closing statement, Amy Sue Vruwink.
I would also like to take an opportunity to thank the League of Women Voters to open up this forum, to have candidates come, to express our points of view, to listen to the stories that we've heard from fellow constituents, but also it's a shame that my opponent couldn't be here to see where she stands on the issue. In the legislature, we don't have an opportunity to run and hide. Our job is to stand up and work for the people of our district. Regardless of what comes up, we are there, and I want to continue that. I'm a proven bipartisan leader. I'm independent. I stand up. I can talk about it, and I can walk the talk. I have stood up. I have worked with Republicans for the betterment of Wisconsin, for the betterment of my district, and I'll continue to do so. I'm not beholden to the party bosses or the special interests. I'm beholden to the people of my district. I always tell people that you can tell the difference between a politician and a public servant. A politician works for themselves. They have higher aspirations. They are looking at this as a climbing opportunity of a ladder. But I work for you. I'm a public servant. My agenda is your agenda, and I am beholden to the people of the 70th Assembly District. And so I want to take the opportunity to thank you. I respectfully ask for all of your votes. Come November 4th, and make sure you talk to your friends and neighbors, because this election truly is about the people exercising the right to vote and making sure they get out and do that. Thank you for the opportunity to join here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Sue Vruwink, who will be facing Nancy Lynn Vandermeer for the 70th Assembly District position. And thank you again to our candidates here that fielded probably about 13 questions today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be taking a short break, and then we will return in about 5 minutes with our candidates for the Wood County Sheriff position. Welcome back to the second portion of our general election candidate forum. We're happy to bring you our two candidates for Wood County Sheriff. Those candidates are Carl Herman and Thomas Reichert. We welcome questions from our studio audience as well as our listening audience at home. Those of you that are watching Solaris Channel 3 and Charter Cable Channel 985, welcome. And we welcome your questions being phoned in to 423-0441. Earlier, our candidates drew for order of speaking. The candidates will have 2 minutes for opening, closing, and then responses to our questions. And just a quick reminder, questions should be directed to the office and not to a particular candidate. Only questions pertaining to issues, not personalities, will be asked, and questions will be screened and sorted for clarity, directness, and duplication. And it is now time for our opening remarks, and we will start with Thomas Reichert.
Thank you, Karen. It's truly my pleasure to be here tonight, and I really want to give my sincere thanks to the League of Women Voters for the opportunity and forum to talk about issues of the election tonight. The League has a great history and reputation for providing these forums, and it's an honor for me to be part of that history. For those of you that just may be getting to know me, my name is Thomas Reichert. I've been a member of the Sheriff's Department for 32 years. During my time at the department, I've held just about every position in the department that's imaginable. Along the way, I was able to continue my education and received a master's degree in leadership and bachelor's degree in criminal justice and management. In 2005, after my friend Kurt Hoyer became chief of police of Wisconsin Rapids, I was appointed the 42nd sheriff of Wood County. Subsequently, I've been elected and re-elected in 2006 and 2010. Our gathering tonight affords me the opportunity to speak of an institution that means a great deal to me, the Wood County Sheriff's Department. The past 9 years has brought great change to the department, both operationally and economically. We have experienced a virtual tsunami in technical advancement and spectacularly succeeded in all budget matters during the harshest economic time since the Great Depression. Times have changed and the Sheriff's Department has changed with it. I became involved in public service to influence public policy for the better and no other reason. When I became sheriff in 2005, my ideas were simple: represent the interests and concerns of the citizens and taxpayers of Wood County, and establish a department that is a leader both locally and statewide. All ideas are welcome in our department, whether they be Democratic or Republican in nature. As the old saying goes, the only bad idea is the one that you don't listen to. By whatever reasonable person would take a yardstick today and measure our department, our goals have been accomplished and the state of our department is as sound as it's ever been. I look forward to discussing our successes tonight and speak of them in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl Herman.
Thank you for having me this evening. Trust is a rare commodity in the world. Do you trust the Sheriff's Department? One could argue that trust of many citizens in the Wood County Sheriff's Department is low, and that the problems are directly attributed to leadership. Elected officials must be voted out periodically in order to bring in fresh ideas. The sheriff needs to be neutral, not beholden to anyone except the electorate. As a citizen of Wood County, we must expect the rule of law and not the rule of man. Justice must remain blind and just not for the well-connected. If left unchecked, the latter will subject us to a police state. In my 32 years of military police experience, the world has changed, but not necessarily for the better. In the military, law and order are clearly defined as right and wrong. Through my travels around the world, there is clearly a huge difference between our way of life and those that choose despotism. These policies are now present in our county and are suffocating liberty, freedom, and personal responsibility. What is required is a fresh perspective from this ideology and a return to limited government intervention. Freedom will always be more valuable to us than security, from which there is never immunity. I, for one, am exhausted with partisan politics and failed party policies. The trust is fleeting. The partisan politician resorts to doing things that are in favor of keeping them in power and ultimately growing government. As a constitutional conservative who believes the Bill of Rights is a solemn contract not to be taken lightly, it pains me to see the lack of respect that partisan politics has caused. They are literally killing the golden goose with their policies. The only clear choice is to vote for an independent for Wood County Sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question, and we will start with Carl Herman. What are your thoughts regarding collaboration between the Sheriff's Department and other departments in and out of Wood County?
I think that's a great idea. I know they do it with my hometown, town of Grand Rapids. It works very well. It is important for communities to interact with each other and to provide quality service. Of course, sometimes that quality of service comes as an expense that must be paid by the citizens, and the citizens need to figure out if that's what they want. And obviously, they will need to pay for that service. And at some point, you do have overlap, which causes more times than not to have individuals showing up at your door when they're not necessarily needed. In the long run, what ends up happening is these services become very expensive, and sometimes a tough decision needs to be made as far as whether or not to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Reichert.
Well, when I became sheriff in 2005, I really was the author and I really was the driving force behind the idea of borderless law enforcement. And what I mean by that is the idea that the Sheriff's Department and the other agencies in Wood County should work as one. We should pool our resources. We should respond with each other and respond to any requests for help that we possibly could. I believe, and what I've gone on record saying, is that we are stronger if we help each other. And it's really that simple. It's a matter of helping each other's department and doing the things that maybe they don't have the resources to do. Some of the examples of things in working in collaboration: I'm a member of the Wood County Law Enforcement Executive Committees. We do drug investigations with other departments. We do information sharing between our investigators and investigators of other departments, both within Wood County and outside of Wood County. We have extensive training that happens with our SRT team and other individuals within our department. We're a member of a number of groups, such as the community response team with judges, social workers, people from the Family Center, working together to solve these problems and helping them. We're a member, and I was the original author of the County Tribal Law Enforcement Grant within our county. Again, another example of collaboration. An example of leadership in our department. We actually run the county grants that are available for Wood County through our traffic division. Working together, as I said, working together as one with the idea of borderless law enforcement is the way to go, and we are all stronger in Wood County in terms of our response to law enforcement if we work together.
Thank you. Our next question will go back to Thomas Reichert first. What can the Wood County Sheriff do to protect our Bill of Rights?
I think the biggest thing that the Sheriff's Department can do is to enforce the decisions that are made by the Supreme Court and lower courts of the judiciary. When a law comes to fruition through through legislation, many times these laws are challenged, and many times they are put to the test constitutionally. And that ultimate test of that is the test of the Supreme Court of the United States. It's always been the policy of the Wood County Sheriff's Department to enforce the law, and to enforce the law as it's given to us by the legislature and the judiciary. I think stepping beyond those limits or those parameters is really a recipe for danger. The idea of an individual's thought superseding that of the role of the judiciary, I think, is somewhat of a dangerous path to go down. We certainly don't do that at the Sheriff's Department now. We interpret the law and we enforce the law as it's given to us, and we believe that that is truly the soundest, most practical way to proceed.
Thank you. Carl Herman, what can the Wood County Sheriff do to protect our Bill of Rights?
Ultimately, I believe the Wood County Sheriff is the most important person in the county. So that being said, I have a big concern about when the Sheriff's Department is equipped better than some military outfits, such as military vehicles like the MRAP being utilized, which is something that you would naturally see in Afghanistan or Iraq, but you don't necessarily want to see in the streets of Wood County. The problems with that arise when you also have no-knock warrants, and you probably have a few people that might take advantage of the fact that the Fourth Amendment doesn't necessarily pertain to everybody. It might just pertain to a few people. You start adding all these things up, and at the end of the day, you kind of wonder where it's all going. And the way I see it, it's not going in a very good place. Case in point would be Ferguson, Missouri. They showed up the first night, and things got out of hand pretty quickly. And as of right now, I still see it as it's not a good case down there. You still have people getting away with things that they shouldn't be getting away with. But at the end of the day, I think they're worried about their rights being taken away. And I understand why they feel that way, because it seems like we're gearing up the local police departments, and in particular possibly in the Sheriff's Department, to look like the military. And I believe that's not right. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will be posed to Carl Herman first. Do you have any ideas on how to be creative or more effective with jail sentencing or inmate programs?
I do not exactly have a broad-based opinion on this subject, because I don't know what we're going to be able to do without getting the community involved, and that by, I mean, getting the people, the citizens of Wood County together to find out and act on some solutions. I know there's, they use the monitoring, home monitoring situation now that allows some of the people to go home. So at the end of the day, it's hard to say exactly where we're going to go with this, but I don't have any specific policies as of right now.
Thank you. Thomas Reichert.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. Do you have any ideas on how to be creative or more effective with jail sentencing or inmate programs?
Really, the issue of jail sentencing isn't an issue of law enforcement. That is an issue of the judges. Now, what happens with that is the judge will sentence someone to a certain time in court, and it's up to the Sheriff's Department to impose the sentence as to how they are going to serve that. We have, to spectacular results, implemented an electronic monitoring program in Wood County. Now, that program in and of itself saves the county, within the last 4 years, about $500,000 each year. Now, I would say that that's a fairly decent amount of savings, no matter who is doing the books on it. The other idea in regards to jail programs, we had a relatively interesting situation with that when I first became sheriff. And one of the things that had happened was I inherited a Sheriff's Department jail that was really spending too much money. So what we did was we reevaluated all the programs that we had going in the jail and basically turned those programs from a paid situation into one that volunteers take care of. We now have a jail that offers a number of programs, such as a GAD program, a program in reading and writing to do resumes and do things that will improve a person when they get out, a program that helps people read, a program that helps people write. We also have religious programs within the jail. And what we fundamentally did is we took that away from being paid for by tax levy and by taxes and made it all volunteer. So in that regard, we were able to very much implement programs that have been very, very beneficial to the people of Wood County and to the prisoners in the Wood County Jail. While we do this, though, we bear in mind that it is the responsibility of the prisoners to take the initiative to do some of these things, and they are not forced to do it. Rather, we look for them to improve themselves and become involved in these programs.
Thank you. Our next question, back to Thomas Reichert. As the chief law enforcement officer in the county, do you think that the Act 10 legislation should be extended to police and firefighters?
That's a really tough question, and I think that's a question that is debated quite often within the ranks of law enforcement and within the ranks. As the program was put out, law enforcement and firefighters were exempt from some of the financial implications of it. However, I would point out that deputies that were hired after a certain date are liable to it. And what is in place is basically a program of attrition, so that when people retire, the people that replace them are subject to the Act 10 legislation. That system is working very, very well for us, and I would not recommend any changes to its current program.
Thank you. Would you like the question repeated?
That's fine. No, I believe this. If you are part of a union and you want to be part of that union, you should probably do whatever it takes to belong to that union. I also believe that if you don't want to be part of that union, or you have any issues with the way the money that's being spent, that's being collected by that union, I think you should have the right to say so, and you should be allowed to do or withhold whatever it is that you want to withhold, because that is your right. It seems like the more society starts to get encumbered in things that it probably shouldn't be encumbered in, we have less choices to make, and other people have decided to make those choices for us, and I believe we should be making those choices no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe it's our fourth question. Back to Carl Herman. What are your thoughts on overtime and law enforcement?
Overtime is probably a necessary evil. I have seen the budget for the last 10 years, and on each one of those budgets, I have seen there has been quite a bit of overtime budgeted, and I believe there's been quite a bit of overtime used when those numbers were put on paper. So that begs the question, do we need to hire more officers, or is it something that is just grown out of control and is used as a way to maybe pad a salary, or some other way of... It's hard to say for sure, because I don't exactly have the inner workings of the Sheriff's Department to go by at this point. But it seems to be excessive, and I think possibly there could be something done about it.
Thank you. Thomas Reichert.
Well, Carl, I'm not exactly sure what figures you were looking at, but let me kind of tell you where we really have been on overtime. When I took over as sheriff in 2005, we had an overtime budget of approximately $500,000, at the department. I implemented a comprehensive overhaul of our department, and looking at overtime was one of the things that I did. If you took the time to look at our budget for fiscal year 2015, you would see that that overtime budget is now under $100,000. Pretty good, 80% reduction in 9 years. I would say that that is a very drastic change. What precipitated that change? One of the things when I became sheriff, my salary at the time was about $70,000. We had individuals at the Sheriff's Department making $110,000 at the time. I changed their jobs, and I changed their job descriptions so that they would be making money that was more in line with what the other deputies were making at the department. I would agree with you with the idea that there is a certain amount of a necessary evil, I guess, or a necessary component of any budget is to have some overtime worked in. The nature of law enforcement is that at any moment we may have a huge severe case which requires extensive overtime through investigations or other things. We budget for that. We budget for that in that $100,000 that we have. Now, the other thing that we've done with part of that overtime budget is I've given back $3.5 million over the course of my time as sheriff back to the county for general expenses. Now, to suggest that we are overspending on overtime right now, I think is a rather rash and somewhat untrue statement. And the reality of the truth is that the Sheriff's Department overtime is drastically lower than what it was 9 years ago, and well in line with what an operation should be for a department such as the Sheriff's Department.
Thank you. Our next question to Thomas Reichert. Recently there has been a lot of attention to Wood County cold cases. What have you done, or what would you do as sheriff to address these important cases?
Well, we don't consider them cold cases at the Sheriff's Department. We consider them open cases and cases that we're going to continue investigation on. Just recently we've had an investigator that has been that's taken evidence to the West Coast for analyzation in a case that currently isn't solved from about 1985. One of the other things that we've done is we've looked at all of these cases with very specific intent in mind. We've had them reviewed by other agencies. We've submitted and double submitted evidence to the State Crime Lab, and we've done things to ensure that every possible angle of these cases have been investigated. Let's look for a second at a couple of these cases. One of them would be the Eleanor Roberts homicide. That's the case I spoke of earlier, where we have an investigation and current evidence analysis going on for the case. Another case would be the Deidre Harm case. Now, in that case, we have identified a subject. That subject is now deceased. However, we have a very strong circumstantial case against them. The third case that we had during my time was the Jennifer Freitag case. Now, we solved that case by submitting evidence back to the crime lab, having it reevaluated, and identifying the person that had sexually assaulted her and abducted her. In the Deidre Week case, we've had some of the best minds, some of the best investigators in the state of their generation looking at this case and analyzing the evidence of it, analyzing the statements of it. And unfortunately, to date, we haven't succeeded in bringing someone to justice on that case. Now, We've worked very hard on these, and we're going to continue to work very hard on them in the future. I just want the people to know these aren't forgotten cases. They're not cold cases that we are sometimes referred to, but rather they are open cases that remain under investigation.
Thank you. Carl Herman.
There has been a lot of buzz about town, especially for the Wake family. And the only thing I can recommend at this point would be to reclassify any of the cases that would be possible to reclassify and bring them back to the forefront to at least take a look one more time. I believe Tom has mentioned that they have done that, but at the end of the day, I might have a fresh perspective on things that possibly maybe the department doesn't have. Now granted, if he did send this out to other departments to look at, I don't know that offhand, but at the very least I would like to bring it back to the forefront and see what we can do with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question to Carl Herman. What do you consider a realistic plan for managing jail costs and housing prisoners?
Since I'm not involved in that on a daily basis, it's tough for me to actually get to the bottom of where we're going to go with that question at this point. I understand that costs go up every year, and I believe that some of the inmates are actually being charged for their time in the jail. And it's possible that we could look at both of those things and see exactly where we're going with those, but as of right now, that would be the extent of my answer.
Thank you. Thomas Reichert.
Could you repeat the question?
Certainly.
Please?
What do you consider a realistic plan for managing jail costs and housing prisoners?
Well, I think that a realistic plan for that is something that we have in place right now. And that plan is to make sure that the viability of our jail is going to be secure for the next generation. One of the things that we've done is we've secured a long-term contract with Waupaca County. And in that contract, we have a capability to house a certain number of prisoners every year at their facility. Currently, we have a contract for 65 people. Now, the amount of money that we pay to Waupaca County each day to house those 65 people is actually very congruent and maybe actually even a little bit less than what we pay in-house at the Wood County Sheriff's Department. The other thing that we've done to ensure the viability of the jail and then to ensure the cost of housing prisoners will remain constant is implementing the electronic monitoring program. Again, on any given day we have between 15 and 30 people on this program, and we pass the cost of the program directly to the prisoners. Now, the other thing that Carl had touched on is the fact that we hold prisoners responsible for some of their own costs within the jail. Now, the taxpayer is not responsible for the prisoner. The prisoner is responsible to the taxpayer, and that's an idea that is very important and very fundamental to what we do. Now, under our leadership and under my guidance, we have been able to reduce the overall costs of the jail, and we've been able to make sure that the viability of the jail is going to last through at least through the next decade. Our contract with Waupaca runs through 2024, and I'm anticipating that if we just stay the course with what we have already put into place, our jail situation is going to be very solid for the next generation.
Thank you. I'd like to remind our viewing and listening audiences to phone in questions to our sheriff candidates, Thomas Reichert and Carl Herman. The number is 423-0441. And thank you to the questions that have been submitted. Okay, gave you guys a little bit of a break there. The next question to Thomas Reichert. Auburndale and other Wood County communities has experienced problems with length of time that trains block intersections. As sheriff, is there something you can do to correct the problem?
There has been a problem, particularly in the northern part of our county, in the village of Auburndale. We've had trains from Canadian National that have sat and blocked intersections, preventing access of emergency response vehicles and emergency response personnel for up to 8 hours. Now, it's a tough call, and you try to be a sheriff's department in central Wisconsin and get a company such as Canadian National to pay one bit of attention to you, good luck. we have had an exceptionally difficult time getting them just to come to the table to speak with us about what they're doing in the Auburndale area. Now, the folks in Auburndale don't deserve to be landlocked or trapped in their cul-de-sac for 8 hours. That's crazy. So what we did, what my suggestion was, is that we start writing them tickets. The county board, working with the county board, we passed an ordinance that made these extended stays at intersections a county ordinance violation. To date, we've issued about 30 tickets for these offenses and have had 12 of these tickets paid for. One of the other things that I did was I made contact with Congressman Ron Kine's office, and he arranged a meeting with me with the Transportation Secretary, Anthony Fox. Anthony Fox was in La Crosse a few weeks ago, and my wife Misty and I were able to go and meet with him and discuss with him the train situation that we're having in Auburndale area. He has made some referrals, and actually we have some meetings coming up later this week to further discuss this situation. The folks in Auburndale don't deserve to be trapped in their house for 8 hours, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Carl Herman.
Yes, a thought just came to mind. So if they're sitting in place for, let's say, up to 8 hours, could they not just decouple across that railroad crossing?
They won't do it.
I see. I'm thinking at the end of the day, that would be my suggestion, and somehow we would have to, tell them that's the way it's going to have to be.
That has been suggested to them, and they won't do it.
Gotcha. Possibly, maybe I could make that suggestion then, going forward, and we'll see what happens. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next question to Carl Herman. What would your position be on no-bid contracts for vehicle maintenance and other needs for the department?
So it's my understanding that there are no-bid contracts right now that I know of. But at this point, I would think that everything should be put out for bid. I think there needs to be competition. I think at the end of the day, people need to be able to know exactly what they're paying for, and that the maintenance is allowed to be done by whoever comes up with a reasonable amount of bid and is able to do the job effectively. Because if you have a no-bid clause, then essentially whoever you decide gets to do the work, and that is not right.
Thank you. Thomas Reichert.
Well, the truth of the matter is there are no-bid contracts in Wood County in terms of the Sheriff's Department now. What we have done is I instructed our Chief Deputy to make an inquiry to all of the garages in Wood County and inform them what we would be willing to pay them for labor costs in regards to car repairs. Several of them have responded to us, and we currently are utilizing them. We have several garages in South Wood County that we do a majority of our service with, Pomps Tire being probably the one that we use most often. We have several in the Northern Wood County area, Dave's Service Center in Auburndale being one that prominently gets a lot of work, as well as car dealerships like Gross Motors up in Marshfield and Ironsides GMC here in Wisconsin Rapids. All of the work that we have to the contracts is given to other businesses throughout the county. One of the things that my opponent could have done prior to this, if this was a concern of his, is maybe look at some of the bills that we've got, and he would see a list of bills that has a number of different garages throughout Wood County identified as being paid for services that were given, and quite frankly, this story that there are no bid contracts going around is just simply untrue.
Thank you. Our next question. Different direction here, important question. For Thomas Reichert, what can be done about the growing heroin and meth problem in Wood County and I think this says northern Wisconsin, or rural or northern Wisconsin?
Thank you. I do agree with you. That is, I think, one of the big questions of our time, and that's not just heroin, but I think that drug abuse in general. The only way that we're going to get really a firm grip and really root out some of these dangerous drugs is to apply the fix before people get addicted to it. Once someone gets addicted to a drug, it's very hard to stop that habit from happening. I'm a very big proponent of our department being strong in the educational effort of informing our young people that these are not things to get involved with. And that's going to eliminate a lot of our problem right now. We have a very comprehensive program within the schools. We do a number of presentations regarding drug use and drug abuse. And I think to some degree it's working very well. It's always easier to prevent a problem than to fix a problem. Now, that being said, there are a number of people that are using drugs. We work with all the other agencies, going back to that question of collaboration. We work with all the other agencies in Wood County as well as neighboring counties, and are a member of a drug task force that specifically is looking at investigating these kind of cases. The individual that we have right now that's doing our drug investigations actually has an emphasis on these kind of cases and has been working at them very hard. We've made several arrests already for heroin. We've made several arrests for cocaine. And we certainly have made a lot of arrests for marijuana. I would, again, continue this two-prong approach, one prong being education, the other prong being hard law enforcement, hard investigations, as the most viable course of action with the heroin problem in our county.
Thank you. The question is, what can be done about the growing heroin and meth problem in Wood County and northern Wisconsin? Carl Herman.
Thank you. First of all, as far as if it's with the minors, I think the important thing is to get the parents involved. It's important for parents to know what their kids are doing, first of all. I don't think parents should rely upon the schools, per se, to take care of their kids, raise their kids, teach them proper morals. If you're an adult doing it, well, it's probably, like the sheriff said, a little bit too late. But at any point you can stop and do the right thing. And I'm sure there's plenty of programs out there that are in place to help you to do that. The thing that I have a problem with is this whole war on drugs, and it's been going on for as long as I can remember. And it just seems like the more money we throw at it, the less it works. So in some respects, things are better than they were years ago, but in other respects, it seems like you try to take one drug off the street, and the next thing you know, there's another drug in its place. I would argue probably meth is a bigger problem than anything else. There's meth houses all over the place. They're very dangerous, and they're hazardous to people's health. And at the end of the day, I think the citizens of Wood County need to probably help us a little bit in actually putting these houses down and getting the drugs off the street.
Thank you. Our next question to Carl Herman. What can the Sheriff's Department do to combat drunken driving in the county?
I think as far as the county goes, they do a really good job as it is right now. There again, I think it's behooving on the people to take a little bit of initiative and not let that person drive. And if they do know that somebody's driving, that they need to make the phone call and get them off the road. Because eventually, it may be not this time, it may be not next time, but eventually somebody's going to get hurt, and then it's too late. The other thing I don't care much for is the first time offender until he's hit the 10th time and you hear about it on the radio. It seems like he's back on the street and we're not doing anything about it. Of course, that might be more of a judicial area of concern, but at the end of the day, I think we need to get the community together and let's do something about this.
Thank you. Thomas Reichert.
Well, the idea of operating while intoxicated and it being a concern isn't something that is certainly new to our area. And it's something that we've taken a hard look at throughout my administration. Again, one of the main things that we have done is we've worked in collaboration with someone. In this case, it's in collaboration with the Wood County Tavern League. We've worked with them, we have put together programs with them, and we've done things to educate people on the effects and what's going to happen to you when you drive drunk. Now, just recently, we had one at a festival in downtown Wisconsin Rapids where one of our deputies worked with the Tavern League. We have a pair of goggles that simulate intoxication, and we had people wear these and try different simple dexterity things that obviously they didn't do too well. The other thing is we need to do stuff that helps. We have been a big proponent of Pub Partners and Safe Ride Home programs. In fact, during my entire tenure as Wood County Sheriff, on New Year's Eve, I've given up my New Year's Eve to actually go out and give people that are intoxicated or maybe overserved rides home. My wife Missy and I have done it the last several years together, and needless to say, it's kind of a different way to celebrate New Year's Eve. But we've had just a blast doing it, and we've served the public good in what we've done. I think that programs like this, you know, the idea that the Sheriff's Department is going to work with the Tavern League to try to limit and make the problem better, plus a strong enforcement effort, which we have in our department right now, is really the way to go to combat the drunk driving problems.
Thank you. Our next question for Thomas Reichert. What steps could the department take to address or prevent a possible Ebola virus problem?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that as this question, because that is something that we have been doing for the last several weeks. I think the important thing to point out to the folks, to the citizens of Wood County, is that it is an extremely unlikely event that we would have an Ebola incident here in Wood County. I think when you look at the nature of those type of diseases, you're far, far more likely to get a very dangerous case of the flu, which kills several hundred people each year in our country, be involved in a car accident, or be a victim of a violent crime than contracting the Ebola virus. What I've done is I've directed my staff to be in contact with the emergency medical providers here in Wood County, and we've made those calls right now. We're also in the process of providing a comprehensive educational program for our deputies to deal with the Ebola virus and what to do if that situation presents itself. Now, currently, there isn't a lot of information out there for law enforcement people to combat or to protect themselves from the Ebola virus. Two of the things that we're doing is one, the obvious thing, international travel, and two, whether or not the person has flu-like or fever symptoms. Those type of screening questions are going to be a part of our response effort to any suspected or possible case. But what the overall effort is that we are going to stay in contact with the people, the health department, the emergency room providers, the hospitals in our county, and have a comprehensive plan that we can address the issue when it presents itself.
Thank you. Carl Herman.
Well, the last thing I'm going to do is probably look at the CDC website and figure out exactly which way the wind's blowing this week. The toughest thing to know is whether or not somebody actually has it. I mean, it's going to be next to impossible. So if you come across somebody, let's say, that's vomiting, you have no idea. You don't know if he's had a little bit too much to drink, or if it's something else. It could be just a common flu, which eventually could kill you anyways. But one thing you could suggest at this point is to have medical kits in the vehicles to at least allow somebody to suit up. Hopefully those kits are available. I don't know at this point if they are or not, because I haven't actually had the opportunity to look. But one would think if at least you would have some type of protection in the vehicle with you in case you had to deal with somebody that had symptoms that resembled Ebola, and then at that point go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe our second to last question here to Carl Herman first. The Sheriff's Office is dependent upon the tax levy. What suggestions do you have for lowering the tax levy while still maintaining the same level of services?
Well, you're probably not going to want to hear this, but it's probably going to have to be some type of a cut. Now, exactly what that cut would be, I couldn't begin to tell you at this point. I know the county is raised what they're going to be spending this year. It's going to be close to $100 million. That's a big chunk of change. At the end of the day, you got to wonder, is there something somewhere that is a duplicate program or many duplicate programs that at the end of the day may or may not be viable anymore, and that we could probably do without. So at this point, I would have to say I'm not exactly sure where I would make that cut. but eventually that cut is probably going to have to be made.
Thank you. Thomas Reichert.
It's a very dangerous suggestion to cut law enforcement right now with the situations that we have in Wood County in terms of the crimes we have and the types of investigations that we do. I think that that's an idea that is probably something that we ought not to do. What we've done is we've put a different program in place. What we've done in order to maintain our budget levy limits, and I would add here that in the 10 budgets that I've submitted to the Wood County Board, we have had 9 of those budgets where there has been a 0% increase in levy limits. Now, what that means to the taxpayer out there is this. The amount of money that you're spending on the Sheriff's Department, 9 out of 10 years that I've been sheriff, has remained consistent. So if in that first year your cost to contribute to the Sheriff's Department was $100, it has remained $100 throughout my entire time. And again, I would point out to you that we've done this over perhaps the harshest economic times since the Great Depression. Simply amazing what we've done. We've done it working together with Democrats and Republicans. It's not a partisan thing, and it's a thing that benefits the people. Again, I had mentioned that my reason to get into public service isn't to benefit myself, but to make better public policy. Here's what we did. We did something so simple. We raised revenues. We brought more money into the Sheriff's Department and boosted our ability to pay for the services that are essential to people. Again, we've done this, and we don't have to resort to these dangerous schemes of cutting programs or cutting law enforcement. Where would you start? Where would be the first place that you would want to cut law enforcement? I just think that that's an idea that's certainly fraught with disaster, and I think it's an idea that the people of Wood County would not endorse.
Thank you. Our last question before closing statements goes to Thomas Reichert first. Assess the recent performance of the Sheriff's Department, and if elected or re-elected, would you keep it in the same direction or change course?
Well, I think this is a fairly simple answer for me. Obviously, we've had spectacular results in the last 9 years. When you look at in terms of budget at our department, we've maintained a very consistent budget, yet we have not cut any services to people. In fact, we've expanded them. We have done things such as there are more road deputies right now out patrolling in Wood County than at any time before in the history of Wood County. Pretty amazing thing. We have done things like brought technology into the Sheriff's Department. The forensic capabilities that we have now in terms of investigation dwarf what we had 9 years ago. We have a situation in our squad cars, let's say, for instance, where technology has been infused in them. We now have squad computers. We have camera systems within the cars that protect the interests of both the deputy and the person that the contact is taking place with. We have recorders within that are available to the deputies that record the conversations and record the actions of people that we're interrogating or arresting. I think Carl said it best. Actually, in an October 1st radio show that he did, he said if we keep electing the same person to do the same job over and over again, we're going to get the same result. That sounds to me to be the perfect remedy here. I have been, in the last 9 years, I've worked very, very hard on providing services, again, because the influencing of public policy is the most important thing that we can do as elected officials. The Sheriff's Department right now is in its ascendancy. We are going up. We have been going up for 9 years, and we're going to continue to go up because I'm going to keep in place the programs that work, the programs that I have originated, and the programs that work for the taxpayers and citizens of Wood County.
Thank you. To Carl Herman, assess the recent performance of the Sheriff's Department, and if elected, what would you keep in the same direction or change course?
I think overall, I think the Sheriff's Department obviously is a good thing to have. During my time as a nominee for sheriff, I've heard some very interesting things. I've heard a lot of negative things, and I've heard a lot of things that I can't share with you because there's just, first of all, not enough time, and it wouldn't do any good anyways. But at the end of the day, you would hope that the Sheriff's Department was doing the right thing, and that it was under the correct leadership. But at the end of the day, I've had too many people tell me that seems to be a problem. Whether or not I can convince you today that this is something we need to make a change for, I hope I can. But at the end of the day, I think there needs to be a change. And even though I said if you want things to remain the same, they probably will, I think at the end of the day, we need to have a change. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the audience at home and here in the studio for those questions. We will move to our 2-minute closing statements, and Carl Herman will go first.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to everybody today and allowing me to come over here and have this forum with the sheriff. The Founding Fathers knew at some point if a person in office never feared being removed, that despotism would take hold. It is perfectly fine to not vote the same people in the same office for this very reason. The words of Lord Acton are, quote, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And unlimited power is apt to corrupt the minds of those who possess it," unquote. It's our solemn duty to never allow our system of government to be used against us simply by voting the same people in the same office. We must return to common law where the citizen of our county feels that they have instituted their rights under the Constitution along with the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. I believe we all want the same thing, but sadly many vote for the wrong people time and time again. I ask for your vote on November 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Reichert.
I would again like to take the opportunity to thank the League of Women Voters for taking the time and caring enough about their community to sponsor and coordinate this debate tonight. Your work and reputation of service is noted and is truly appreciated. One issue we talked about tonight is budget. Stable levies, decreasing budgets, $3.5 million returned to the county ledgers are among our many achievements during my time as sheriff. I've had the opportunity to speak of the operations of our department. The simple fact is the Wood County Sheriff's Department is better equipped, more technologically advanced at any time in the history of the department. We have an investigative unit that possesses more forensic capabilities than any department in central Wisconsin or the northern part of the state for that matter. We have a jail facility that's been totally reorganized from the ground up. The jail runs on budget, is efficiently staffed, and gives prisoners the responsibility to be accountable to the taxpayers. You may ask, how is all this possible? I'd suggest a couple things. First, we utilized technology wherever we could. We recognized early on that the new wave in technology could benefit us in many ways, both operationally and budgetarily. Secondly, we all work together. The county board has been our partner in all of our accomplishments. We instituted a new way of doing business where politics didn't matter, results did. As evidence of this, how many of you have driven through our county and seen my sign with a sign of the opposing party? I am proud to have individuals from both parties supporting me and working towards common goals. Back in 2006, I made only one promise to you during the entire campaign. I promised that I would get up every morning, I would go to my office, and I would work hard every day to give the people a department that serves them and one that they could be proud of. I hope that the results that I have achieved demonstrate my sincerity to that promise. I double down on that promise tonight, and I pledge to continue the path that the Sheriff's Department is taking, and that is a path of stability, service, and achievement for the people of Wood County. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. This concludes tonight's forum. The League would like to thank these two gentlemen for stepping up and running for public office and for your willingness to appear here tonight. This was Thomas Reichert and Carl Herman, candidates for Wood County Sheriff on the November 4th general election. This forum will be rebroadcast at various times before the election, and it's also available on demand at our River Cities Community Access Media website, probably about 24 hours after the forum. Thank you to the League volunteers for helping to have this forum take place, and also to Tom Laux, the producer here, excuse me, and David Ballerstein. the intern and camera operator. Thank you again. Good night.